Hello, everyone. This is Joanne Lantz, and I'm here with another episode of Masters of Extraordinary Proficiency, ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And I have someone truly extraordinary to introduce to you. Today, we have Maine Independent Senator Angus King. Hello, Senator King.
Good to be with you, Joanne.
It's great to be with you, and I want to thank you so much for being our guest. It looks like you are in your home today.
I am. I flew back from Maine to Maine from Washington last night, and am doing meetings from the house. This is my second Zoom this morning. My wife is in the kitchen, and I'm in the living room, and the dog's behind me, as you can see.
I love it. I think it's awesome. What's your dog's name?
This is Mowgli.
Mowgli. Well, it's going to, oh, I'm good. He's not even paying attention when we say his name. And I'll be sure to say hello to Mary afterwards. Your time is so precious. We're going to get started right away. And Senator King, Angus Stanley King Jr., that is a wonderful name. And you grew up in Virginia. Angus is not a very common name here in Maine, and I don't know what it's like in Virginia. What was it like being a young child with the name Angus?
Well, that's a great question. It wasn't all that fun sometimes. People made fun of it. They mispronounced it. They called me Agnes and stuff like that. So, Joanne, starting in about the 7th grade, I became Gus. And for all of high school and college, I was Gus. And so when someone calls my office and asks for Gus, my staff knows it's somebody from that era of my life. Then I got married when in law school, and the young woman I married had a beagle named Gus, and she didn't think it was all that great to have a dog and a husband with the same name. So I went back to Angus, which was my dad's name, and that's what I've been ever since. It's an old Scottish name, very common name in Scotland.
It's a wonderful Scottish name. My husband is Scottish, so he shared that with me immediately. He says, "You know, that's Scottish." How were those childhood years formative, especially if sometimes kids are cruel?
Well, I was blessed. I was raised in a middle class family. My dad was a small town lawyer in Alexandria, Virginia. And I always tell people in Maine that I wanted to be born in Maine, but my mother was in Virginia that day, and I thought it was a big day for her and I ought to be there. So, that's my excuse for not being born in Maine. I've now been in Maine 52 years. I came in 1969, but grew up I had an older sister and went to public schools all the way through public schools, large public high school, played football in high school, which was a big deal for me. It was the sort of passion of my life at that point. Went to college in New England, came back to Virginia, to University of Virginia Law School, and then came to Maine after law school. Now, Maddie is asking to go out, so you're going to have to excuse me for just a minute because I got a second dog that's got to go out. Okay.
So this is truly what it's like to be working from home and working from Maine when the dogs take priority over any type of college. So yeah. Dogs take priority in our lives.
Of course. Well, she was going to paw me until she got out. I know how that works. Anyway, this will give a little air of humor, authenticity to the recording.
Well, we were talking about how you left law school and you came back to Maine, and actually you came to Maine. You came to Skowhegan, Maine, Pine Tree Legal. How did the road from Virginia law lead to Pine Tree Legal in Skowhegan, Maine?
That's a great question and a funny story. When I was finishing up law school, I wanted to join what's called the National Legal Services Program, which is a program to provide legal services to low-income people. The idea being that the legal process can be pretty intimidating, and if you don't have a lawyer, you just can't navigate it very well. So I joined the national program when I was finishing up in law school, and the fellow called me up one day and said, "Congratulations, Mr. King, you've been admitted to the legal services program, and you have three choices about where you'll go. One is the Rosebud Sioux Indian Reservation in South Dakota. The other is legal aid in Alexandria, Louisiana. And the third is Pine Tree Legal in Maine." And so here I am on the phone. And one of my theories of life, Joanne, is that the biggest decisions come, it's sort of at random, and you don't really realize how they're going to affect the rest of your life. So I'm on the phone, and no research, no website, no discussion with my wife or anything else. I had to make a choice. And I remember saying, well, I don't speak much Sioux, so I don't think I want to go to South Dakota. And I grew up in the South, and I really would like a change from that. And so Louisiana doesn't sound good. So I guess that leaves Maine. So that's how I came to Maine in 1969. Now, the funny part of the story is the guy who ended up in the job, that job in South Dakota at the Indian reservation, ended up governor of South Dakota.
No way. Wow.
Isn't that astounding? Now, I don't know what happened to the person that went to Louisiana, but two of us that went into those jobs ended up governors of our states.
Wow. Wow. That is serendipity. And you think about young people who are making decisions of their life, and they ponder so hard and they work so hard. And yet, what I'm taking from this story is sometimes you just have to try something, and it completely changes your life. Wow.
Well, that's so true. And you never know when a sort of random event like that is going to cause it changed my whole life. And then when I got to Maine, I'd never set foot in Maine. The only place I'd heard of was Portland, and that's where I figured I would be. And I got to Portland, and they said, no, you're being assigned to Skowhegan. Well, that's where I started my life in Maine, and it was wonderful. Made wonderful, good friends there that are friends to this day, and it was also a great introduction to Maine, to the small town, pretty tough area. I mean, it was Somerset County, was at that time pretty, a lot of jobs in the woods and low income. My pay was $7,500 a year. And I remember finding out that put me in the upper 90%, the upper 10% of income in Somerset County.
Wow. Then you're in Maine for a few years, and then you're diagnosed with a malignant form of melanoma. You're not even 30 years old. You're married.
Right.
Have a dog named Gus. How does that impact you as being a cancer survivor?
Well, it basically what it tells you is don't sweat the small stuff, and everything is small stuff.
It is.
It really gets your attention in terms of what your priorities are, what's important. And I've done it twice now. I had malignant melanoma in my 20s and had surgery, and I'll never forget the doctor saying, "Well, you have the same chances as somebody driving from Washington to New York on the New Jersey Turnpike." I said, "Okay, I'll take those odds. That's not bad." And then, lo and behold, 40 plus years later, I'm diagnosed with prostate cancer. And this was just 5 years ago. I had surgery and later on radiation. So what it really does is tells you what's important. And what's important are family and friends and people who love you and will look after you. And whenever I do a high school graduation speech, I have a speech that I've used for years. That's basically, it's 10 things I wish somebody had told me when I was 18. And it's a whole list of somewhat funny things. Some are serious, some are funny. The 10th one is always take care of your friends and family when times get tough, they're all you have.
Mm.
And that's what I've learned going through that experience. It puts you, it puts perspective on life.
I certainly don't know what it would be like to have prostate cancer. My husband had it, so I know what it's like for Mary to be along your side. And you know, it really does have an impact, especially if it's the second time you face this. Do you feel like a survivor?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you know, the thing about cancer is it never lets you go. As you know, it there's always a sort of dark cloud lurking out there, but that can be a motivation to you to say, hey, I'm going to make the most of every single day. I mean, you hear people say that, and it's sort of a cliche, but if you've had that kind of experience, it becomes real. You know, because we don't know what the future holds for us, and so you just got to wring the most out of every day. And in fact, Joanne, that's why when I was an old guy running for the Senate. I first ran for the Senate at the age of 68. I'd been governor, 10 years before, and thought that my life in politics was over. So anyway, I ran, was elected in 2012, and then I had a decision to make. Do I run again at the age of 74? And I decided yes, because I hope and believe that I have 6 years of health and vigor left. Why not use it doing something worthwhile? I can't imagine just sitting around and watching TV and instead of yelling at the TV, I get to yell at the real people,
Oh, I
in
don't.
Washington.
I can't even imagine how difficult that is. You ran recently for senator. You said at the age of 74. It was back in 1994. You ran for governor.
Correct.
And Susan Collins was, in fact, one of the individuals that you ran against, and you became.
Yeah, don't mention that. She's a little sensitive about that. Well,
Oh, okay.
She was my Republican opponent in 1994.
And you ran as an independent. Is that a metaphor for you, being independent, both then and now?
Well,
a metaphor for your life?
I think it's who I am. I mean, I like trying to do what I think is right without somebody else telling me this is what I have to think or do. When I was governor, I found it was a terrific advantage, I thought, because number one, I could appoint anybody I wanted. I didn't have to say I can only appoint Democrats or only appoint Republicans. I can find the very best people I could find to help me in the, as in the cabinet and as judges, for example. Yeah, it's kind of a luxury to be able to make your own decisions. Now, what they say, the term is I caucus with the Democrats, which means that's who I meet with on Tuesdays, and I vote with them to sort of set up the Senate. But I'm not obligated to vote with them on every issue. I didn't have to join the Democratic Party or sign a pledge or anything like that. In fact, my condition for caucusing with them was that they would leave me alone on votes, and in fact, that's been the case for the past 8 years. So yeah, it feels it's where I am, and I feel good about it. I vote more with the Democrats these days than with the Republicans, but to tell you the truth, the Republican Party is different than the Republican Party was when I became an independent back in the 90s.
I love the term "you're not obligated," and all of these experiences, whether you were teased as a child and changed your name so that you could fit in, to the experiences of your 20s, and then again recently 5 years ago, you're not obligated. You are choosing your own path, and it would be so wonderful if more people make that decision to choose their path. It really is. I have another question for you.
Go ahead.
No, you go.
Well, you said a few minutes ago something important, and that is that sometimes we overthink decisions. Particularly, I talk to young people who are thinking about college or what comes after high school, and they go through this. I think Mary let the dog in this time. They go through this agonizing process of, all of the worry and the fretting about, is it the right place and am I doing the right thing? And the truth is, you can't really know whether it's right for you, and you just got to go with your instinct, I think, more than anything. My college choice was sort of funny in this regard. I didn't have any idea where I wanted to go to college. In the summer of before my senior year in college, my sister married a guy from Dartmouth College up in New Hampshire. I never heard of Dartmouth College, but I liked him and I liked the guys at the wedding. So I applied, early decision, got in, and that was it. I took no college tour. I went to didn't visit any colleges, and I never saw Dartmouth until the day I arrived in September of 1962 to enroll, and it worked out great. So, what I tell people is don't overthink these things. Use your instinct and try to get some information. But too often, I think we agonize too much, and you just have to be ready to accept life as it comes at you.
I had a similar experience when I went to college. I had never stepped foot on the campus. Early decision was accepted, and it was wonderful because I ended up going to school in Indiana, and from Maine to Indiana, it's not as different as wide of a variance as Virginia to Skowhegan, but it was quite different. It was really. Speaking of Mary, and we'll hope to say hello to her after this call, I have this image in my mind. You would have no idea. You were visiting Geiger 2 years ago, and as you were leaving, I was out in the parking lot, and I saw you get in on the passenger side of a not so new SUV. It was pretty rundown SUV. And Mary was driving the car, and this image is permanently etched in my mind. And how does Mary in the driver's seat driving this car speak also as a metaphor to your life? I mean, it was just you and Mary. She's driving. You're sitting in the passenger seat. You're going off. You have no idea that I'm watching you. Is that some sort of metaphor for you as well?
Well, the first thing to share is that rundown SUV we still have, and it's now at 205,000 miles. So it's my view. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. It's still running. My friends in the car business despair about that. But no, Mary and I pretty much share everything. She picked me up at the airport last night and brought me home, and I suspect what often happens in those kinds of situations is that I'm working. I'm reading up for the next meeting or on a call or something like that. So, but when it's a longer drive, I drive back and forth on weekends when we go somewhere else and further away in Maine. It's we pretty much share everything.
It says that you don't have to always be in control as well.
Oh, no, that's right. No,
You have time for two more questions?
Of course, Joanne.
Oh, good. You also shared at that meeting that you used to, prior to COVID, have the Wednesday night barbecues at your home in Washington, D.C.
Right.
with some of your fellow senators that you didn't know so well. And it was a wonderful gathering of getting to know individuals. And now we're in COVID, we're in lockdown, we're social distancing. How are you able to form relationships today, especially in Washington? You have wonderful relationships here in Maine, but especially in Washington, where you can't have Wednesday night barbecue.
Yeah, it's really hard. And let me back up a minute. One of the reasons the Congress and the Senate don't work very well is that we don't know each other. Mm-hmm. Here I am in Maine talking to you on Friday morning. The schedule of the Senate militates against us forming relationships. The first vote of the week where we have to be there is Monday afternoon after 5.
Okay.
The last vote of the week before which we can leave is Thursday afternoon, usually around 1 p.m. The result of that is everybody goes home every weekend. Brian Schatz, the senator from Hawaii, goes home every weekend. I come home pretty much now. During COVID, I haven't come home every weekend because I've quit. I flew for the first time last week in a year. All the rest of the time, I've been driving back and forth, sharing the driving. I've done it once or twice by myself, and then I've shared driving with a staff member. But I've been driving back and forth. But the norm before COVID was everybody went home, so there was no weekend. You know, your kids would go to school with other kids, and there'd be barbecues and neighborhood parties and all of that. That doesn't exist, so it makes it very hard to get to know one another, and that's why I had these little rib dinners, and we're going to start doing that again as soon as we can, just to bring people together. That I believe you can't do business unless you have a relationship. And I'll never forget it. One of our dinners, I had two senators sitting across from me of different parties, and one looked at me and said, "You know, I've seen this guy around here for 8 years, and this is the first time we've ever talked." Think of that. And do you wonder why the Senate doesn't work very well when people don't know each other? And it's easy to demonize someone else if you don't have any relationship. So now the nearest thing we have to my rib dinners is my favorite hour of the week in Washington, which is the Wednesday morning prayer breakfast. We have a prayer breakfast every Wednesday morning. Had one this Wednesday, and there are several reasons I really like it. One is it's a quiet moment in the midst of all the craziness, and secondly, it's the only bipartisan event of the week. It's the only time, because the two parties have official lunches on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and the Republicans have one on Wednesday. So there's no social stuff. So the prayer breakfast is other than official committee meetings, it's the only bipartisan thing. But the third reason is really the special part. Each week, a different senator speaks about their faith and their lives, and there's no staff and no press. And you learn things about your colleagues that you never knew before. 2 days ago, our guest was Chuck Schumer, who talked about his life growing up, his great-grandfather, who was a rabbi in Eastern Europe, his grandfather, who was a guy who worked hard in the streets of Utica, New York, how Chuck grew up in Brooklyn, and it was fascinating, and how he wasn't raised particularly Jewish, but he took it on later in life. I mean, it was just very moving and very real. The week before, it was a guy named Kramer, who's a senator from North Dakota, talking about his family taking in a child, a foster child. I mean, it was so very real stuff. So we do have that's something I hold on tightly. I was the chair of the prayer breakfast until this January, and I gave it over to co-chair to Senator Gillibrand of New York. But anyway, that's one of the problems, Joanne, is we just don't know each other. So I try hard. Often I go to a dinner on Tuesday nights with members of the House. We don't know House members at all. They may as well, the House of Representatives may as well be in Atlanta. I mean, we just have very little relationship with them. So I've tried, since I've been there, consciously to develop those kind of relationships.
There's so many takeaways from all of this conversation, from don't overthink things, try different things, be willing to go to Skowhegan, Maine, not even knowing where it is, to not sweating the small stuff, being a survivor, and still, even with COVID, I didn't know about these prayer breakfasts and how they function. There are ways, if we really take the step forward, to continue to build relationships. Well, I, for one, can't wait for COVID to be over so we can do it in person.
Won't it be nice? Well, Mary and I we just bought tickets for the North American Blues Festival in Rockland this July, and that's our gesture of optimism that we're going to be able to go. We're going to take the RV. We're going to, spend some time up along the coast RVing, which is what we really love to do, and so we'll make it work. I have to tell you a story about the prayer breakfast. Yesterday, Thursday afternoon, my job is to preside over the Senate. Each of us has an hour that it sounds like an honor, but it's more of a chore. So don't be impressed.
Yeah.
Although I have to say, I was sitting in that chair the other day presiding over the United States Senate. And I thought, what would my father think if he could see this, of this kid, none of my 4 grandparents went beyond the 8th grade. My parents both worked their way through college. We're the first generation to go to college. My father he would have been amazed. But anyway, I'm sitting there and it's a quiet moment. Nothing's going on. And on the desk are 2 or 3 books, the rules of the Senate and stuff. And one is the Bible. So I reached over, pulled out the Bible, and opened it at random, just literally at random. This is the whole Bible. And it opened to my favorite verse in the whole Bible, which is Matthew 25, about our obligation to do things for the least of these, my brothers. I don't know what it means, but as you can tell, I'm still processing this idea that of all the pages and verses and chapters and stuff in the Bible, it opened to the one that means the most to me. I texted a friend of mine, said, maybe I'm supposed to be a pastor. He said, well, it's not a bad job. I said, you're not going to get rid of me that easily.
Well, I would suspect your friend probably thinks, Gus, you did okay. And that brings us to full circle. Angus Stanley King Jr. Your father had to be so proud of you because you were named after him, and he continues to be proud of you today. You truly are an extraordinary person and doing extraordinary things. And I thank you for your time. It's so precious, and for sharing this very personal interview with me. I just can't thank you enough.
Joanne, I would correct what you said. I'm not an extraordinary person. I'm an ordinary person with an extraordinary opportunity. I think that's a better way to characterize it. And I'm trying my best to do everything possible to take advantage of that extraordinary opportunity.
And you do it so well.
Thanks.